All right, now the other rule I had mentioned, the altitude rule. Excuse me. This one's pretty easy. Now, first, an altitude, it's just like it is in what you've heard before, like the altitude of a mountain or the altitude of a plane. How high? For those, it's how high above the ground it is. And when you measure the height of something off the ground, it's always straight up and down. Like the altitude of a building, you wouldn't go like that and say the building's 3 miles long or 3 miles high or anything like that. So an altitude is straight up and down from the right angle to the other side. Now, maybe the triangle will be rotated around, but it's still going to go straight that way, form another right angle. The altitude is this right here. Now, the way this one works, you split. There'll be two parts of the hypotenuse, and I'll try to color code them a little bit here for you. The way this works, one part of the hypotenuse is to the altitude, meaning over the altitude, as the altitude is to the other part. So you got one part over the altitude equals the altitude over the other part. That's the rule here. So if we take a look, the back of that sheet from yesterday, like I said, well, here it is. It's kind of rotated around, but it's the same idea here. That's the altitude. So we have one part, the x, over the altitude, and then stay with the altitude over the other part. Now cross multiply. X times 64, 64x. And then 48 times 48, 2304. Divide that by 64. 36. All right, again. This one's spun all the way around here, but it's still one part of the whole hypotenuse over the altitude, and then the altitude over the other part. Oop, that's 2. Cross multiply again. 225x, and then 120 times 120, 14,400. Divide by that 225, 64. Okay, here we go again. One part. Now, look, you could choose the other part too. You can start with either one of them. So, I don't know, maybe I'll do the 256 this time over the 192. And then the 192 again, because that's the altitude over the x. You can start with either part. And you're still going to cross multiply 256x. 192 times 192. 36, 864. Divide by 256. 144. And so on. Here it goes again. Pick one of the parts of the hypotenuse. Maybe I'll do x over the altitude, the 120. Stay on the 120. Over the 64. Cross multiply x times 64. Then 120 times 120 is 14,400. Divide that by 64. 225. Same. Pick a part over the dotted, the altitude, stay with the altitude. over the other part. Cross multiply. 108 times 108, 11,664. Divide that by 144. 81. Pick one. 25 this time. 25 over 60. Stick with that 60 over the other part. 25x. 3,600. 3,600 divided by 25. 144. 15. Again. Cross multiply, divide by 144. 25. And 16. 192 times 192. 36864. Divide that by the 144. 256. All right. Hopefully those weren't too bad. It's just the new rule. Couple of different things. This one, be careful. The x is for the whole hypotenuse, but this isn't the rule we did yesterday because we have this altitude. So I need the other part here. I can't do the leg rule. There's no leg here. So I have to do the altitude rule, but I need this other part. So if the whole thing is x, we would have to represent the other part by the whole thing minus 64. Just like we had to do on a couple questions the other day with the, the side splitter? But they were both numbers. But it works the same thing. If you have a line segment that's chopped up into two parts, you take the whole thing, subtract one part, you get the other part. Now it works the same. We'll forget about the whole hypotenuse for now. We'll do one part, x minus 64, and you could have done the other one, doesn't matter, over 48 equals 48, stay with the altitude, over the other part. Cross multiply, well, we got to use parentheses here. And then 48 times 48. Oop, running out of room here, so I get 64x minus 4,096 equals 2304. I'm going to add that 4,096 to the 2304. And I'm going to put it up here. So 64x equals 6,400. Divide by 64, 100. So that's one little twist that they can throw at you there. Same thing. The whole thing is x. The whole minus one part is the other part. So we'll do the same thing. The one part over 12. 12 over the other part. Cross multiply. 9x minus 81 equals 144. I'm going to add that 144, or add the 81 to the 144. Divide by 9. x equals 25. I wrote that up there to leave a little room. So that's one twist for these they can give you. If they give you the whole hypotenuse, do the whole hypotenuse minus one part to get the other part. And then, not the exact same trick, but here the x is on the altitude. So watch what happens. We go one part over the altitude, stay with the altitude, over the other part. Oh, when we cross multiply this time, x squared, 9 times 1 is 9. Ooh, hey, this is just like the Pythagorean theorem, just like the ones I mentioned. Square root now to cancel out the square. And that one was nice because you got a perfect square. On 20, pick one part over the altitude over the other part. Cross multiply, x squared equals 12. Square root. Ooh. Well, that's not a perfect square, so we got to do simplest radical form. Write out the list if you need to. 1 squared 1, 2 squared 4, 3 squared 9. I don't need to go any further because I got the 4. 4 times 3 is 12. So my final answer, square root of 4 is 2. Bring the other one with you. So they can make you do simplest radical form on those as well.